quiz quickly though. So, and that quiz, the quiz that's up relates to HTML and CSS specifically. It should be pretty easy. It's almost all multiple choice. I think there's a couple fill in the blank. Okay. All right. So just as a recap on the interaction between the HTML and the CSS, um, we have these in the head. We have these link lines, and these link to files that are referenced. So this is in the index.html. So in an HTML document, we're linking to these various CSS documents, okay? So here we're linking to Font Awesome. That's the thing that allows us to use the smiley face. We're linking to Bootstrap. That's what allows us to use those columns. And then we're linking to our hello world, our hello world.css. Okay? And so all of the changes we're making are either going to be just straight up customizations, or they're going to be customizations on top of what Bootstrap is doing typically. Bootstrap or Font Awesome. Like we're going to make the icons bigger, or we're going to make the icons a different color, or we're going to make the column, we're going to do some modification to the columns, or we're going to do our own classes or IDs, or we're going to just modify an actual HTML element. Okay? So if we look at our CSS file now, CSS files are always constructed in the form of, here's an HTML element. So this is the body element. This refers to the actual body right here. That's what that refers to. Okay. In the case of actual elements, when we're overriding those, and so we're applying background, font size, and the height of the whole body in this case. The font size is going to apply to all the elements inside of it as well, okay? Until we override them with the other in the other elements, okay? And then here's a p tag that applies to any p tags that are in here. So here we have a paragraph. Here's another paragraph. It applies to those. Classes will override just a generic p tag. So if we have a p with a color, but then we have a p with a class, that's gonna override it. An ID is gonna override that. We specify classes with a hashtag, pound sign, number sign, whatever you want to call it, and then the name of the ID. So this one would refer to an ID equals angry face. I think we actually got rid of that in here. So we have a smile wink here. So if we wanted to say ID equals smiley face, and then just copy this, save, and then change this to smiley face, save, Command Tab back to our Chrome, Command refresh, and then this is big and colorful now. Okay. This is a class by itself, so anything with the class row would have these properties, but there's nothing in here. This is just emptied out. So this is actually useless. This could just be deleted. This is just that left column with ID hello world column 1. Okay. And then this applies to both columns directly in here. So both of these COL SM6s, I made, in this case, both of them a height of 100 VH. So does anybody have any questions at all about CSS? There's a lot of properties, okay? Memorizing all of them is hard, and the syntax for the actual properties is sometimes inconsistent. So yeah.
For the P's, the way I do those is like like with how H's, we're doing H1, H2, kind of P1, P2,
nope.
Like that.
Nope. But if you wanted to have some kind of a hierarchy, that is actually a great question, and I think other people should probably wonder that, right? Too, right? Like why are headers the only thing that have a hierarchy like that, right? Like an outline hierarchy. So if you want to have like a an outline format of things. So that's typically where you'd use an unordered list or an ordered list. So that's a UL, and so that's where you see like a bulleted list. So and you could get rid of the bullets if you want to. So that allows you to have like a hierarchy of items, and they get indented in things. So that's typically what you would do in that circumstance. But you could also say P class equals P1, right? So you could make your own ad hoc
Okay.
thing, right? That's a great question. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
And people do that kind of thing all the time, right? So like that's kind of how things like Bootstrap get developed. Is people have an idea like, I want to keep my stuff organized in a certain way, and they develop these class libraries that they share with other people, and they're like, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to use that. So that's kind of how Bootstrap got developed. Yeah. Good. Any other questions about any of this?
Wait, what does
Yes.
the P stand for again?
P just stands for paragraph.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's there's a couple ways of looking at this. Like so when you name things that you're gonna use all the time, you can abbreviate super short, right? It's like a paragraph is like the basic unit of text, and so it kind of makes sense to make that just the smallest possible abbreviation, right? Whereas most of the time, my recommendation, like if you're going to label something in computer science, I say give it the most descriptive label that you can, because typing is cheap, error checking is hard, right? And so, but so yeah. So anyway, so some of these end up being really short, but we use them so often that actually makes sense, right? So like this could be called header 1, header 2, paragraph, but it actually makes sense to keep it really short.
What is that dot row?
Dot row is the class row. So class equals row in index.html. So that's going to be right here. Class equals row right here. Okay, got it? So it's going to affect just, any elements that have a class equal row, and there could be multiples. And if we add any more, it's going to affect those. Okay? All right, everybody got all that? So, anybody have anything else? So, next on the list, we're going to deal with images. Okay? So, I'm going to go back to our friends at W3 Schools, because that is sort of, I think, next on the list for their list we were going through anyway. Bum, 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 bum. Or it was close. Yeah, because we went through links, colors, yeah. So, images. So, a couple things about images. When you use images, make sure you're using images that you have the rights to use, okay? So don't just Google for an image and don't use Baby Yoda, okay? Like as much as you might want to, don't use Baby Yoda. Disney will sue you. They sue everybody, okay? That's actually probably the best example, because Disney's terrible about that, right? So, if you're doing something completely just for fun and you can take it down quickly, yeah, there are different levels of exposure you have, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to pay your legal bills, so don't do it. It's against university policy. But in general, just for yourself, right? We're learning this stuff to do this in a professional environment. You have to be aware of how copyrights influence what we're doing, right? So when you're dealing with imagery, you need to make sure that you're using images that you have the rights to use. If you're not sure if you have it, don't use it. Use something that you know you can use, okay? So the very first thing I'm going to do is show you a place where you can use things that you do have the rights to use, okay? So there's a free stock photo site called Pexels, okay? So I'm just going to pick something here. Some things popped up here, so paint sounds fun. Okay. So this looks cool. Let's just grab this. Okay. So I'm going to go to the free download here. Okay, allow. Okay, so now this downloaded to my downloads folder. Okay, in order to use an image, it needs to be in your, the easiest way to use an image is to put that into your project folder. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to my downloads over here. So this is the last thing I got here. I'm going to put this into my hello world here. I'm actually going to rename hello world starter, as should you, because on the server it's going to be called hello world, not hello world starter. Okay, so you should definitely do that. And then the other thing is this image that I downloaded. This is a big long complicated name. I don't want it to be complicated. I'm just going to call it paint. Okay, so paint.jpg. Okay, and you don't have to follow along exactly with what I'm doing, but I do want you to be aware that you can use the Pexels website. You can use your own images there that you want. You can always, if you take pictures with your own, your own device, take a picture with your phone. You can use those pictures. So like that's what you should generally try to do. The copyrights favor artists. So if you're an artist, use your own stuff. You're in better shape. You're not going to sue yourself. Okay, so now the way we put an image in is very, very straightforward. I'm actually going to use this as a background. Okay, so I'm going to set this as my body background. So I'm going to probably screw up the syntax for this, but it's background here. So we're going to use URL, and then it's going to be just in quotes paint.jpg. Because it's all in one folder. And I'm going to save it. And if I did that correctly, oh, because this is because I renamed it. Yeah. Okay, so I have to rename it here. Oh, and I have to turn my color off of this. What am I missing here? Oh. Because I'm editing the wrong one too. Let's close that up and reopen this. Don't rename things when you have it open already. Rookie mistake, right? All right. There we go. Okay. So now I've got this paint as my background image here. I have this is white over here as my background image. That's down here. I can just comment this out. I'll just take this line out actually, just so we can see the whole thing for now. Okay. Okay. So easy as that. There are a number of CSS background properties. Let's see. So let's actually jump over to this first. So, so this is what we just did, background. So background-image is the specific thing if we're using a background image, but you can also just use background. That gets a little complicated at times. So if we're just going to specify the image and not have, the reason I did it the way that I did, there is a shorthand, so we can have a backup value if it doesn't find the image. So you can specify background like this, so we can give it a color. We could give it a color in case it didn't find the image. That seems kind of weird, but if the image is a big file and it doesn't load right away over the internet, it'll set the color. So if you, let's say you had a a forest picture, you could set it to like the average green of the forest until it loads that in, right? And then one other thing that I like to do is this background size. That's always kind of cool. And background size resizes the image to cover the container. Okay. So what does that mean? That means that even if you have the wrong size image for what you're doing, it'll fix it so that it works with the whole container that you're using. So I'll show you. So for backgrounds, that's usually what we want, right? So it kind of fills it up the best it can always. So that's usually what we want. We want to see the maximum amount, but we want it to always fill it. We want it to always fill the space. Okay. So that's the CSS part of using images. Any questions about that? Now, there's another part to using images. We can also embed images as content in our HTML. Okay. So I'm going to grab another image. So let's see what's going to, Valentine's Day, sure. Let's pick a Valentine's Day thing. Okay, so I'm just going to download this and move this into my project. I'm going to rename this Heart. Okay, and then the way we add this in, I'm going to add this into the second column. We add that with an image tag, which is just img, and it's not image spelled out. Again, we're abbreviating because you use images a lot. Okay, so abbreviating in that case kind of makes sense. Same thing with source, src. It's abbreviated because we use it a lot. And then heart.jpg. Okay, now this is case sensitive. Okay, so you have to name what you named it here. This has to exactly match what we named it over here. Okay, and this isn't showing up here. I think I can refresh this list. I think, maybe not, but it's there, so it's fine. Oh yeah, it is right here. Okay, and whenever you have an image in here, when you validate it, it will yell at you if you don't have alt text. Okay. So anybody want to give me a reason why it would yell at us for not having alt text?
That's where you hover over the image, correct? So it looked bad for the customer if it's just all the image name.
So I mean so that's a browser dependent situation, okay? But yes. So if the other case would be that it's going to show the file name, which could have been that long gibberish, yes, absolutely, yes. So if it didn't load, it shows you what's supposed to be there. Yes. So that's actually the original intent. So if the image didn't load, it shows you what's supposed to be there. So that is true. But there's actually two other reasons that are the most important right now, and it's neither of those things really. Yeah.
Screen readers.
Yeah. So it's disability. So we're building. Whenever you build anything, you have to build things with disabled people in mind. It's actually the law for most people, most professionals. If you're going to be working for government or business, you have to legally do that. That alt tag, it's illegal to not put it there. You have to have it, okay? And then the other piece is, it's also just good business because Google can't necessarily tell what an image is. It sort of can sometimes, but it takes longer too. It can read text a lot faster and easier, okay? So it helps your SEO. It helps your search engine optimization. It helps your website get found if that's your goal, okay? So it's just, there's no reason not to do it. It's just it's a good practice, okay? So good. So anyway, so we add it just like that. So now I'm going to go back to my browser. I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to hit refresh. Okay. And so now here's my image over here. Anybody see an issue with it? It's giant. All right. So what are we going to do about that? Okay. And how do we do that? Okay. And how do we do that? Never. You would never do that. It's an awesome guess, and lots of people would say that, but you should never do it that way. Yeah. A wrong answer is better than no answer, so thank you for that. Yeah, yeah.
You should make a class in CSS that follows the size parameters and associated with your.
Yep. So you can totally do that. But we're going to actually do an interim step because we're using Bootstrap. We can actually just jump in here and we can just say IMG width 100%. Okay. And so what that's going to do is it's going to set the width to 100% of the container, and it's in one of our columns, so it's not going to be wider than our column. Okay. And then I'm going to say height auto, so it's going to scale the height automatically with the width. Okay. So it's going to resize it to fit on our screen. Okay. So I'm going to save that. That's our cheater way to get it going. Now we might want to refine it further, but that gets it on the screen. So that can be our default size, just to get things to fit on the screen. And you could say, well, maybe I don't want it to be 100% because I want to have a little space on the sides or something. And then we can, but that gets it into the screen. So like this is a thing that I would put into every CSS file I have. Okay, I would just have this always there because why would you not want that? And it works with mobile. So if it's on mobile, it's just 100% of the width here, right? So it just makes images work, okay? Now, so the other way you could do it, and this was the traditional way to do it, and you will see this. You'll see like height equals 400, 400, width equals 600, whatever it was, and you can hard code the values in there. But this again is we're mixing style where it doesn't belong, and then you run into the issue of which one should win if we put style information in the HTML and we put style information into our CSS. Which one should win? And different people will give you different answers, and there are different reasons why either one could be right or wrong or should be right or wrong, and then you run into issues with either of those, right? So it really just is better off to not have this here, okay? So now back to the we want to give this an ID here now, and we want to call this heart. So we can make this specific one have some other properties, right? So I'm going to say heart. I'm going to give it a border radius of 20 pixels. Okay. And I'm going to give it a border of 5 pixel solid red. I think that's the right order. 1 pixel solid. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay. So I'll show you what this looks like if I did it right. Yeah. Okay. So I rounded the corners and added a gaudy border on it. Okay. So I can choose like whether I want to apply this to all images or just to a specific image. Maybe I do want to round all the corners. Maybe I don't. Okay. I think it's 50%. If I make this 50%, yeah. You can make this a circle if you make it like 50% or like, an oval. So that's kind of cool if you want to. Okay. Any other questions about images? Pretty easy, right?
Will
Good.
the border resize with the picture?
Will it resize? You mean like will the border get skinnier if the image gets skinnier?
Yeah.
Not in this case. So that's a great question. Okay, so what that gets into is when you are resizing like this, you can set up breakpoints, and you can change that size for those individual like breakpoints, they call them, right? You can set up a breakpoint, and you can say at this size and smaller, or this size and larger, do this. Yeah, excellent question. Okay, cool, awesome question. Anybody have anything else? Want to see us toy with it any other way? Yeah. Like of the screen? Of the background? Yeah, so in this case, I have two columns, so then I could just set the background for one column and background for another column. Okay, so let's grab another another backgroundy kind of picture. Let's say space. Okay, so I'll go back here. I'm going to get rid of our background here. Actually, I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to go down to this column 1. I'll make that the paint background. And then I'm just going to dupe this. And I'm going to make column 2. And make this space. Okay? As easy as that. I'm going to go back here, refresh. And now I have space over here, and I have paint over here. Is that what you were wondering? And if we wanted to add an image in line over in this column in the HTML, we could go into the HTML, and we could drop this same image actually. And in fact, we should do that because we'll do it with a different ID, right? We'll call this heart1, and we'll call this heart2, and we'll say in our CSS that we only want to impact heart2. Okay. So we're going to refresh this, and heart2 has the fancy border, heart1 does not. Okay. And this is turning to be a super ugly page, right? It's awesome. All we need to have is something blinking, and it'll be amazing. Yeah.
I just have a quick add-on question. How do you have the projects pane on the left side there?
I think that's built in.
How do I get to it? Like,
Oh yeah, so I dragged the folder into it. So yeah, you might have to go like file, open, and then open or add a project folder maybe, or file open project. Yeah, I always drag the folder in. Yeah, sorry. It always takes me a second to think through it on Windows. So. Okay, any other image questions? Should we look at some JavaScript today?
Yeah.
Cool. Any nays? I think that's enough HTML for now. Enough CSS for now. We can look at some code. All right. So our JavaScript. For the reference to our JavaScript is always put at the bottom of our body. And the reason for that is we want the JavaScript is going to interact with our HTML elements. We want to make sure that all of our HTML has loaded before we load any of our JavaScript, because we don't want the browser to start interacting with things that aren't there yet. Okay, so that's just the easiest and best way to kind of force that to happen. Okay, so in terms of performance and usability, this is just kind of the convention that everybody's fallen into doing. Okay, so we put all our scripts at the bottom. Unless you have a specific reason not to, you should put your scripts at the bottom. Okay, so we're gonna always do that. So, and then in this case, I'm always naming them like the project name. So hello world.js. Okay, so we're gonna open up our .js file. So the first thing that we will see is that is comments. Okay, so there are two styles of comments in JavaScript, and JavaScript shares the commenting style with other C style programming languages, and that's C like the letter C. Okay, not like the TV show C. So you can do these 2 forward slashes. That means anything on this line following that will be a comment. Okay, and you do that so that if we have something, I don't know if I have any like that, I don't. So if I want to add something like on this use strict line, and I want to add a comment like that says we use strict because ... right? Whatever. Okay, so that I want to comment that specific line right there, I can add that after it. Okay, so that's why that exists like that. Okay, it also exists so that you can turn off a piece of code. So if we want to turn off use strict, we can just comment it out. Okay, and that's kind of the term for that. We can comment out code. And you can do that in CSS. You can do that in HTML too. You can comment out certain things, but it's, you know, that's derived from the code part, right? Like we want to make the code not happen, so we comment it out. So when you're debugging things, you comment things out all the time. I'm going to comment out this function. I'm going to comment out this section of code until I can get it debugged. Okay. Then the other style of comment is this style, and it's a forward slash with and that followed by a star, ending with a star and another forward slash. Okay, and that can span multiple lines. Okay, so I could do this one right here in that way. Okay, so instead of this, I can do this, and that all turns into a comment. Okay, everybody kind of follow that? I don't care what kind you use. You can use either one with a couple of exceptions. You can use either one. You should comment your stuff, if for no other reason but for yourself, so that you're explaining to your future self what this did, why you did this, why you named it this way, whatever you need, right? These are notes for people. The computer doesn't care. Okay. There is one line that needs to be here. Every starter that I give you, every starter zip I give you is going to give you a .js file. It's going to have this beginning part on it. This needs to stay here, okay? This line needs to be here the way that it is. This is for the JSLint tool that we use to validate, okay? And the reason for that is, without this, some of your code will not validate properly, because we need to say, this is for JavaScript in a web browser. Without it, some of the things we do won't work, won't validate. They won't validate, and we're developing, so some of the things we do won't validate. Okay, without that. Okay, so you want to always have that in there. Okay, so that's just a don't fix it if it isn't broken kind of thing. Okay. So any questions about comments? Cool. All right. Next. And this is a very complicated looking thing. Okay. This is called an anonymous function. And everybody familiar with the term function from algebra? Anybody not familiar with that? So like f of x, and then f of x is an operation of some kind, and it returns a value. So in programming, we have the same kind of thing, right? We have a function. It does some stuff. It can maybe return a value. Maybe it prints something on the screen. Maybe it can do whatever. That's what a function is. It's something that does a function. Okay. So that's what this is. Okay. So in our case, we're going to okay. First off, you will see JavaScript that is not formatted this way. Okay. This is a little bit extra complicated. The reason for that, we're encapsulating all of our code in this anonymous function to create our own namespace. And I'm going to circle back to some of these terms, right? But we're encapsulating everything so that if you include any other libraries, you're not overwriting any of that library's variables. Or if you're including any other JavaScript, you're just not screwing with any of their stuff. They're not screwing with any of your stuff. Okay. So this is the way to do that. Okay. So this is just an anonymous function, and this is just kind of the syntax for that. Okay. So it's just a function with no name. It just says execute this right now. So that's what an anonymous function is. Just like do this right now. Okay. So we're just wrapping all of our code in this. We could just get rid of this and just start our code right here with use strict and just do the stuff. Okay. And you'll often see JavaScript that does just that. Okay. Okay. So then, and stop me if you have any questions about anything. All right. So everybody's familiar with the idea of variables in algebra, right? So variables in computer science are a little bit different in that they can vary. Okay, so like you would never see like an algebraic equation that says x equals x plus 1, right? But we see that sort of thing all the time in computer science. Okay, where we would increment a variable. Okay. But we're not trying to find out what x is. The computer already knows what x is. Like there are different goals here. So these variables they're just storage containers. They're just it's just a space in memory where some data is stored. Okay. So in this case, I'm storing what is referred to as a string variable. Okay. A string variable is text. That's all, just text. So we refer to variables in JavaScript with the keyword var. Since we use it all the time, it's abbreviated. So var, and then we can make up whatever name we want. Variable names, the convention I use here is the variable names are going to be all lowercase, and they can use underscores. Okay, so and I try to be relatively long with my variable names because my programs are short. I'm not reusing these names all the time, so I want to be very clear what these names mean. So if instead of like NC1, I'm saying new column 1 because this is the new column 1 text. Okay, I could have even said new column 1 text. Okay, or whatever. So so variable names can have letters, numbers, underscores. They can't start with a number. They can't really have dashes because a dash would signify subtraction. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay. So stick to underscores, letters, numbers. Start with a letter. Typically stay away from capitals, except where noted, and I'll point that out. Okay. So a string variable is just text. In this case, we have a string literal, which means we're typing it out. Okay, we're typing out the literal text in the code, and we're wrapping it in quotation marks. Okay, and so this is a statement right here. Okay, and all statements in JavaScript end with a semicolon. So lots of stuff there, but like we only have to learn that once. And that applies to every single line of our program, really. Okay. So everything ends with a semicolon, just like what else? CSS. Okay. All the CSS properties end with a semicolon. So that's easy. That's cool. That's similar, right? So any questions so far about string variables? About variables at all? There's a million things that could come up. Feel free to ask her as we go. Oh, also, I didn't make a note of this because there is a comment here. Maybe you guys read it, maybe not. Use strict. Okay. The reason this is here, it's going to yell at us about things that ordinarily the browser would not yell at us about, because it just tries to figure things out. We don't want the browser figuring out what we want it to do. We want to tell it exactly what we want it to do. If it's confused, we want it to say it's confused. Okay? We don't want Google Chrome trying to figure out what we meant. We want it to know what we meant. Okay? You never want a computer guessing what you meant. You want to tell it exactly what you mean. Okay? So that's what this is all about. Okay? So all of your JavaScript programs need to say use strict. That is important. Okay? And we can talk more about that another time too. Okay. All right. So I have some new column 1 text. So this is what gets swapped into new column 1. This is what gets swapped into new column 2. Okay. That should be pretty obvious, right? And then I'm initializing a variable here with an empty string. Okay. For old column 1 and for old column 2. Okay. So we're the word initialization means we're setting up a space for it, but we're not putting anything in it. Okay. So you can initialize and put a value in, or we can just initialize it and not put anything in it. But we're setting it up with the var keyword. So before we use a variable, we need to initialize it with var, and then when we use it down here again, we just use the variable. We don't use var. Okay. So you need to initialize your variables up top before you use them down below, always. Okay, and that's whatever programming language you use, almost without fail. There are some exceptions, but almost all programming languages, you want to initialize your variables up on top before you use them down below. So that might be in a section of code, that might be in the whole program, but in some fashion you want to initialize your variables and then you want to use them down below. Okay. Questions so far? Good. You guys are too smart. It scares me when people are too smart. All right. Now this next thing is the console log. Okay. Console log is something that is built into your browser. It's built into the developer tools, and it outputs to the developer console all this output. Okay. So anything you want to put in there as a message to you to see if your program is working, you can put out to the console log. Okay, so let's look at what it is actually outputting. Okay, so we can right click, go to inspect, and go to our console. And then every time I click here, I should get this. There, user messages. Okay, so every time I click here, it's printing a bunch of output here. Okay, so all of this output here, this is being produced explicitly by the program. So updated by toggle. Okay, so this is where it says hello world.js starting. So I can probably go way up to the top. Hello world.js starting. This is the stuff that just printed out here. This is the new column 1 text. Old column 1 is blank. Okay. And then updated by click. So that gets printed somewhere down below. Okay. Oops. All right. All right. Any questions about that at all? Okay. There should be. So, all right. So we can print out literal strings. So there's a lot of stuff in here. We can print out a literal string. We're doing a lot of things here, okay? So this is a function call. This is a built-in function called console.log, okay? So we're calling a function. We're passing it a parameter. This parameter happens to be a string literal, okay? So we're passing it some literal text we want it to print out. Then in this next line, we're passing it a string literal, but then we're concatenating with the plus symbol, which is kind of an unfortunate choice because plus means addition too, so that gets confusing, right? And then we're concatenating new column 1, okay? So we're gonna tack on to the end this text to the end of new column 1, okay? So new column 1 colon space and then this text, okay? And then you'll see that reflected right up here. So that's what printed out, okay? Everybody see that? So that's how you can print your variables out. You can check your work. You can see if your stuff is working, okay? So it's not a mystery if your variables are updating or not. You can check all that stuff. Okay, so I'm printing out new column 1, old column 1, 2, 2, okay? Makes sense? Then I'm printing out this dividing line just for no reason, just to make things look a little nicer. And then these things here, what do you think these are? Any of you guys see these before? Who said that? Yeah, what? New line character, okay? So yeah, so this is like hitting the enter key. Okay? So \n is an escape code. The backslash refers to like escaping it out. So it doesn't literally print \n, \n, \n. To print the backslash, you have to put \\. Okay? It's printing a character return. It's hitting the enter key. Okay? So if you want a blank line in your console log, that's how you do it. Okay? And this works all over the place. So like when you have a text file, these are in your text file, you just don't see them. These character returns are in your text file. This text file I'm editing, at the end of each of these lines, that's what this represents right here. This right here is this. Okay. So, any questions? Yes.
Why are you using the old columns, or for what? What is the purpose of using them?
Of using
The variables old columns.
because we're toggling. So the whole purpose of this project is to toggle. So I'm reading in the text that's in the document. Okay. So I'm creating a space. I'm creating the old column to store what's already in the browser into there. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. Don't everybody all get excited at once. Okay. Now we're going to start programming. We got variables down, right? That's cool. String variables, anyway. We'll do some numeric variables on the next project, so that's cool. All right. So global functions. So one thing that I should be clear about here, so we're not doing a good job of segmenting out our program because this is such a small program. I have global variables that are visible throughout the whole program. That's usually not a great idea. You usually want to encapsulate. You want to minimize the destruction because maybe you want to use X. If you use a variable name X, maybe you want to use X in another part of your program. And maybe you want it to mean something else, right? So sometimes you like to just have these localized variables. But in this case, we're using global variables that work throughout our whole program, and we're going to use global functions that work throughout our whole program. Okay. So now we finally get to some interaction. Okay. And this is where you guys are going to actually do some. We'll end up doing some work. Okay. So part of the project that you have to do is you're going to have to create an actual function. Okay. So here we are. There's a lot here to unpack. Okay. So all of this stuff, it's all indented properly. So everything else, all the way to the end, is all in one anonymous function. Okay. So all of this is in this anonymous function that's called here. Okay. So this is going to look a little bit complicated, even if you have some programming experience. So you may have to unlearn what you have learned, but we'll see how this goes. Okay. So in JavaScript, we have this model that allows the browser to take care of listening to things for us. So it's paying attention to whether the mouse wheel is scrolling or the document is done loading, all of these activities that are happening without you having to worry about it, which is pretty phenomenal. And then your JavaScript program gets notified. Okay, so that's what this is about. Okay, so your JavaScript program gets notified when a click happens. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're adding an event listener. This is a built-in function. We're adding an event listener to document.body. Okay, so this is kind of weird, complicated stuff, but basically we're saying anybody who clicks anywhere in the body, we're going to add an event listener to that. We're going to allow them to click anywhere in the body, and we want to get that click. Okay, so that's why I can click anywhere on this page. Okay, and it's doing that toggle. Okay, you can add a listener to a different element, and there are ways to do that. Okay, we'll cover those in the next project. Okay, we'll have different listeners for that one. Okay, but in this case, that's what this does. Okay, so far you haven't had to change anything, by the way. Like, that can all stay. Okay, so but this part this is an anonymous function. Okay, and it's a big one. And maybe it shouldn't be so big. Maybe it should be multiple functions. I don't know. That's a decision that you should make. But what we definitely should do is get it out of an anonymous function and put it into its own function. Okay. So I'm going to call this page toggle. Okay. And I'm going to call this page toggle. And I'm going to cut this out. And I'm going to put it right up here. Because we have to create the function before we can call it. Okay. So the way that listeners work is you can put it in line. You could put an anonymous function in line, like we did, and that works. Or we can put the function name, and it'll call that function then. Okay. Now, assuming I didn't make any typos, which I'm prone to do, I'm going to refresh. Make sure this still works. Yeah, good. Live demos are the worst, man. And I'm making so many typos. It's terrible. Okay. Did everybody follow what I did there? That's one critical piece of your project. You have to create your first function. Okay. So that's to me, that's the only hard part about the project. Otherwise, you're just adding pictures, making it look cool. The only programming involved, though, is you have to make a function. Okay. And literally, that's all you had to do is just copy paste it and do that. Like, done. Okay. So any questions about that at all?
Where do you place the function at?
Well, you need to create the function before you can call it. Okay. All right. And for your final thing, you don't have to output anything to the console. I don't care about that. Like what you put up to the server. So what you're turning in, you don't have to output anything to the console ever, really, as long as it works. As long as everything's working, I don't care if it prints to the console at all. So all this debugging code, this is all extra stuff. So so I'm going to go through how this does what it does. Okay. How are we doing on time? We get done at 2:05. I promise I'm not going to talk all hour for much longer. Yes. Okay, so couple things that you have to keep track of. Okay, so a function has to have the keyword function, just like a variable has to have the keyword var, followed by the name, an open and closed parenthesis if it's just a function with no parameters, and then an open bracket or open curly brace. Okay, and then at the bottom it has a curly brace. Okay. And then finally, the listener has to have the parenthesis, the click, comma, and then just the name here, parenthesis, semicolon. So you probably left an extra character or took an extra character out. And if you're not sure, undo to the point where it worked. Okay. Yeah, I'll actually just do that part again. I'll undo back to that point. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So this is what was there originally. Okay. So originally we had this anonymous function where the word function followed by no name was here by itself. Okay. So then all I did was I selected right at the beginning of this F, scroll down all the way down to the curly brace, hit Command X, went right before the D, hit carriage return, hit up arrow, hit Command V. Okay. And then I went up and I'll give this a name. I'm going to call it page toggle again. And I did this in kind of a little bit different order before, but then I'm going to add page toggle back down here. Okay.
Well, you do.
Yeah, this is all on the video, guys, just so you know. Yeah, okay. Okay. Is that everything? Yep, okay. So this is the original. Okay. And all we're doing is we're just moving this anonymous function. Okay. We're just creating a standalone function. Okay. No big deal. So I'm just copying that. Okay. See that? So from the function, the word function, the F here, I'm just scrolling all the way down to this curly brace here. Okay. Because we have to get the whole function.
So
Okay.
we're copying and pasting that part.
Yep. Yep. But you have to understand why, because we're pulling this anonymous function out and creating a standalone function.
Okay, so we're creating an independent function.
Okay. Then I'm going to paste it. Okay. And again, this time I'll do it in this order. I'll add the page toggle here. Okay. And make sure that you have the parenthesis and the semicolon at the end here. Whenever you have an open parenthesis, you have to have a closed parenthesis. These are the parameters that get passed to this add event listener function. Okay. And then I'm going to just add that function back in right up above here. Scroll up to where the empty function call is, and call it page toggle. Okay.
And then what does it say at the bottom again?
Okay. Everybody good?
When I click on mine doesn't change.
When you click on yours doesn't change.
Yeah.
Any more information?
On the website.
Okay. So then you change something that you shouldn't have changed. So you can always, this is the thing, you can always go back to that starter zip, start over. Okay. We haven't done anything that's that much work. so far, right? You can always start over.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So with the last few minutes left, let's see, how much can we get through here? So I just want to give you an overview of what this is doing. Okay. So, so what we need to do in order to toggle this, we need to read in what's already there, push the new columns onto the web page, okay, and then wait for another click, okay. So just so we can swap back and forth, okay. So that's really what we're doing here, okay. So this very first thing is we're setting old column 1, which, if you recall, starts out empty. Okay, when the program starts, it starts out empty, and I'm printing it out each time, so you can see that the value changes each time. So we're reading it in. So, and we can read. We're going to use this a lot. We're going to use this so much to the point where we're going to make our own abbreviation for it. So this document.get element by ID. So old column 1 equals document.get element by ID. This is a built-in function. Okay, built into the browser. So hello world column 1. Okay, so we're going to get all of the HTML that's inside of that element. Okay, so if we go to the HTML here, the hello world column 1, we are going to grab all of this HTML, and that's going to be put into that variable. Okay, everybody follow that? Make sense? Okay, now there's a potential where you could exhaust memory or something. We're not going to worry about that for this, but that is a potential concern there that should be like in the back of your head, but we're not going to worry about that for this. I don't think that's a concern for this. Okay, so that's what inner HTML does. Okay, so inner HTML is a property of this. Okay, so we're getting this object from the document. Okay, and we're accessing this property. This is kind of object-oriented programming. We'll get more into that too. So we're just accessing this property, okay, and kind of just plugging in the ID name here. So just like in CSS, we use the pound sign. Here we just plug it into this formula, okay. So if we want to get the HTML and we want to throw it into a variable, this is the formula we use. Okay, we're going to use this a lot, so we're going to actually make a little abbreviation for it. Okay. So we got old column 1, and I comment this each step of the way. So grab the current column 1 and save it. So we're saving that into old column 1. Replace the screen contents of column 1 with the new text. Okay. So now we're gonna grab column 1 again, and we're gonna grab that property, and we're gonna set the inner HTML equal to new column 1. So we're gonna set it to the text that we set up here. Okay. Now remember, we wanted to, and then we're going to do the exact same thing with column 2. Okay, so this is exactly the same thing with column 2. So we're going to grab what's already in column 2. We're going to replace what's in column 2 with the new column 2. Okay, we're going to output all of that stuff to the console log so we can debug it in case there's a problem. Okay, and then this is the key. This is what allows us to toggle. Okay, we're going to copy what was in, we're going to set new column 1 to what was in old column 1. And we're going to do the same thing for column 2. Okay, so that the next time this function runs, it's going to do the opposite. Okay, because the document has the new stuff, so we need to replace it with the old stuff. Okay, so does that make sense to everybody? So the computer knows, so some of it's on the screen, some of it's in a variable, and we're just swapping places with that stuff. Okay, and this gets printed out each time, so you can look at the console log if you get confused by that. Okay, this is all documented, and it's all in the console log. Okay, and that's it. That's all this does. Okay. So now the final thing is I want to show you how we validate. So I'm going to hit Command A, Command C, Control A, Control C on Windows, and I'm going to go to jslint.com. Okay, I'm going to paste the whole thing in here. And because we set up our stuff properly, we should just be able to hit JSLint here. And it sets up parenthesis what, where. Oh, I didn't. We redid that too many times. I didn't give this the new name. So that, which is exactly why we do that. Okay. So I didn't give it the page toggle name. So I'm going to give it page toggle. Okay. So that's what an error looks like, by the way. Okay. So it gave us an excellent error here. Okay. So it says it expected an identifier and instead it saw parenthesis. So it's like you didn't give this function a name and you should have in this context. This should have a name. Okay. So I'm going to do this again. Command A, Command C. Command A, Command C. Clear. I'm going to do this again. Did I paste it twice? Is that my problem? I did. All right. Okay, there we go. So we got a clean bill of health. Okay. So the other cool thing that this does is it points out that we have an anonymous function. It explains the things that we have in here. It outlines all of our global variables and function. You know, it functions are variables, and then it talks about page toggle and what's in there. So it gives you an overview of your whole program too, which is kind of cool. Okay. So all of your programs have to pass JSLint. Okay. Otherwise, you don't get full credit. Okay. So, any questions about anything so far? I know I went kind of fast, but I hate using the whole class period because I want you guys to be able to work on this stuff. So, again, be creative on your projects. I think next class period will be mostly working on stuff. So you guys should be planning on working on Hello World. Okay. So that is all I got.